The music academy was buzzing with excitement and nerves. Today was the day of the big auditions, and the small hall was filled with young musicians clutching their instruments, flipping through sheet music, and pacing nervously. Among them was a boy who had always loved the piano. He had spent countless hours practicing in his room, sometimes late into the night, fingers moving over the keys until they were sore. Today felt different though. The pressure of performing in front of the director, who was known for being strict and having little patience for mistakes, made his stomach twist with nervous energy. He watched the other children warming up, some confidently playing small pieces, others fumbling with their music sheets. The boy tried to focus on the piano in front of him, imagining the keys as friends waiting to sing under his touch. His mother gave him a gentle pat on the back and whispered words of encouragement. His father nodded at him, trying to hide his own excitement. Both had always believed in his talent, even when he doubted himself. The director, a man with sharp eyes and a quick smile, walked through the room. He had a reputation for being tough but fair, and occasionally he liked to lighten the tension with humor. Today was no different. As he passed the boy, he chuckled and said loudly, "If he performs the piano, I'll kneel right here." Everyone in the room turned to look at the boy, some whispering, others grinning. The boy felt his cheeks grow hot. He knew the director didn't often make jokes like this, and part of him wanted to laugh, but part of him felt the weight of expectation pressing down. He tried to ignore the stares and whispers. He focused on the piano in front of him, tracing the familiar black and white keys with his eyes. He remembered the first time he had touched a piano. It was at a small music school a few blocks from his house. His fingers had felt clumsy and awkward, unable to find the notes, but the moment a simple melody played correctly, he had felt a rush of happiness that he had never experienced before. From that day on, he practiced every chance he got, learning pieces from simple tunes to more complicated compositions. Now, standing backstage at the academy, he could feel all those years of practice and effort converging into this single moment. Every note he had played, every mistake he had corrected, every long evening of practice was leading to this. He closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, letting the rhythm of his heartbeat sync with the image of his fingers moving over the keys. Around him, the other children were talking, some nervously, some confidently. A girl nearby was humming her piece to herself, rocking slightly from side to side. A boy was tapping his foot, pretending to be casual but clearly anxious. The boy tried not to compare himself with them. He knew that everyone was nervous, and everyone had their own story. He reminded himself that his love for music was stronger than any fear. The director returned to the front of the room and called out the names of the first few participants. One by one, children walked up, some playing beautifully, some stumbling over a few notes. The boy watched intently, learning from each performance, noting what made a piece feel alive and what made it fall flat. When the director laughed softly at a funny mistake in one performance, the tension in the room eased a little. It reminded the boy that even the adults understood that mistakes were part of learning. Backstage, the boy's mind wandered for a moment. He thought of the late evenings when his parents would sit quietly in the living room, listening to him practice, offering smiles and quiet encouragement rather than applause. He thought of the small moments of frustration when his fingers refused to move the way he wanted, and of the small victories when he finally mastered a difficult passage. All those experiences had built something inside him, a determination that went beyond fear, a quiet confidence that would carry him through today. As the auditions progressed, the boy felt a mix of anticipation and calm. Each performance reminded him why he loved the piano. It wasn't about winning or being the best. It was about expressing something deep and personal through the music. The director's playful comment about kneeling no longer felt intimidating. Instead, it became a challenge, a moment of fun that added to the excitement. When the boy's name was finally called, he felt a surge of adrenaline. He walked to the stage, feeling the wooden floor beneath his feet, the bright lights shining down on him. The hall was quiet, the audience waiting. He sat at the piano, fingers hovering above the keys, and took a deep breath. The room seemed to hold its breath with him. He remembered every lesson, every practice, every moment of doubt and triumph. He remembered why he loved music and why he had chosen to face this moment despite his nerves. The first note was the hardest. It was a small sound, almost fragile, but it carried with it all of his years of practice and passion. He played slowly at first, finding his rhythm, letting his fingers remember the paths they had walked so many times before. As the music began to flow, his nerves melted away. Each note was a small piece of his story, each chord a statement of who he was and what he loved. The director leaned forward slightly, watching intently, a smile spreading across his face. The boy didn't notice at first. He was lost in the music, in the sound and the feeling. He played with emotion, letting the music rise and fall, letting it speak louder than words ever could. The audience seemed to disappear, replaced by the piano and the boy's connection to it. As the final notes lingered in the air, the boy sat still for a moment, letting the sound fade naturally. The room remained quiet, as if everyone were holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Then, the director clapped slowly, deliberately, his eyes shining with genuine admiration. Other audience members followed, breaking into applause. The boy's heart swelled with pride, relief, and a sense of achievement that words could not capture. Backstage, his parents were beaming, unable to contain their happiness. Other children whispered to each other, some in awe, some inspired to try harder next time. The boy felt a quiet satisfaction that went beyond recognition. He had faced his fear, shared his music, and stayed true to himself. The director, true to his earlier joke, gave a small bow, kneeling slightly, and the boy laughed, feeling the lightness of joy that only comes from doing something you love and doing it well. The experience stayed with him long after the auditions ended. Walking home that day, he thought about the power of music to connect people, to express emotions words could not, and to inspire courage in moments of doubt. The academy had been a place of nerves and pressure, but it had also been a place of growth, learning, and self-discovery. The boy knew that this was only the beginning of his journey, but it was a beginning that would always remind him of the joy of music and the courage it takes to share it with the world. Backstage was a mixture of nervous energy and quiet anticipation. The boy sat on a small bench, his hands resting lightly on his knees, though his fingers itched to play. He could hear the other participants from the hall, some finishing their pieces with confident notes, others leaving trails of mistakes behind. Each sound reminded him of the world outside the walls of his room, where he had practiced alone. But this was different. The music now belonged to everyone in the hall, and every note mattered. He glanced at the other children waiting nearby. Some were chatting nervously, trying to distract themselves from their racing hearts. A girl was rubbing her hands together, muttering her piece under her breath. A boy tapped his shoes impatiently on the floor, clearly frustrated at his own mistakes. The boy tried to focus on himself, to block out the noise and the distractions. He closed his eyes for a moment and pictured the piano in his mind, its keys smooth and familiar, ready to respond to his touch. In his mind, he remembered his earliest lessons. How awkward it had felt to stretch his fingers over the keys, how difficult it had been to remember the notes, and how he had sometimes wanted to give up. But his teacher had been patient, guiding him through each mistake, celebrating even the smallest victories. Those lessons had taught him more than just music. They had taught him patience, perseverance, and the quiet joy of improvement. Today, all those lessons felt important, more important than ever. The director walked by again, his footsteps echoing in the quiet backstage area. He glanced at the boy and raised an eyebrow, a small grin on his face. "You ready for your turn?" he asked in a tone that was more teasing than intimidating. The boy nodded, swallowing hard. The director chuckled and moved on, and for a moment, the boy felt a small sense of relief. Even the director, with his stern reputation, seemed to understand the nerves of a performer. The boy's mind wandered briefly to the audience waiting outside the hall. He imagined their faces, some curious, some serious, all expecting something extraordinary. He reminded himself that he didn't need to impress anyone, that his job was simply to share his music honestly. The pressure was still there, but it felt manageable when he thought about music as a friend rather than a test. He watched the other participants as they performed. One child played a short, cheerful piece that brought smiles to the audience. Another struggled with a long, complicated composition, their hands trembling as they moved from note to note. The boy learned something from every performance. He noticed the way confident players relaxed their bodies, how they let the music flow through them instead of forcing it. He made a mental note to focus on feeling the music rather than worrying about perfection. Time passed slowly, each second stretching longer than the last. The boy's heartbeat was steady, but his mind raced with anticipation. He could almost feel the piano waiting for him, as if it had grown impatient for his touch. He remembered the evenings spent practicing difficult passages, the quiet moments of triumph when his fingers finally moved with ease. All of that preparation had been leading to this moment. He was ready even if he didn't feel completely calm. A teacher from the academy came backstage to guide the next performers. She smiled at the boy and whispered, "Your turn is coming soon. Just take a deep breath and trust yourself." Her words were simple, but they carried a weight of comfort. The boy nodded, taking a slow breath in and letting it out gently. He could almost hear the music in his mind, each note waiting to be played with care and emotion. The director called out the names of the next few performers. The boy watched as children walked onto the stage, some taking confident steps, others hesitant. He observed the way they carried themselves, noticing how nerves sometimes made even the most talented players stumble. He reminded himself that mistakes were natural, that even a single misstep didn't define a performance. What mattered was the courage to keep playing, to continue sharing music even when the heart trembled. The boy's thoughts drifted to his own journey with the piano. He remembered the afternoons spent in a quiet room at home, the sunlight falling on the keys, and the way he had felt when a difficult piece finally clicked. He remembered the encouragement of his family, the quiet pride in their eyes, and the small moments of laughter when he made silly mistakes. Those memories gave him a sense of comfort, a feeling that he wasn't alone even in this intimidating moment. Backstage, he shifted slightly on the bench, testing the feeling of his fingers. They were steady, ready to move with the music. He thought about the rhythm he loved, the way notes could rise and fall like a story being told. Music had always been a language for him, a way to express what words could not. Today, he had the chance to speak that language to an audience, to let the piano carry his feelings across the hall. He could hear the applause from the previous performer fading, replaced by a hush as the next child took the stage. The boy focused on his breathing, letting the calm moments fill the space around his nerves. He reminded himself that he had practiced, that he knew the pieces well, and that the music had been part of him for a long time. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about being true to himself and the music he loved. As the next performer finished, the teacher signaled to the boy. His heart jumped, a mixture of excitement and fear. He stood, feeling the wooden floor under his feet, the small movement of energy coursing through his body. He walked toward the stage entrance, each step bringing him closer to the piano and the moment he had been waiting for. The other children watched quietly, some offering small smiles of encouragement, others simply waiting their turn. The director gave a small nod, his eyes twinkling with amusement and interest. "Go ahead," he said softly, and the boy felt a surge of determination. He reached the piano, his hands hovering over the keys, and took a deep breath. The lights were bright, the audience silent, and for a brief moment, everything felt still. He closed his eyes and pictured the music flowing through him, each note a thread in the story he was about to tell. He remembered the countless times he had faced challenges in his practice, the moments when a difficult passage seemed impossible, and the times when persistence led to success. Those memories strengthened his resolve. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to play with honesty, to let the music speak. The piano awaited, and he was ready to answer. He pressed the first key gently, the note ringing clear and pure. A sense of calm washed over him. Each subsequent note followed naturally, fingers moving with confidence and emotion. He felt the music around him, as if it were a living presence guiding his hands. The audience seemed to lean in, captivated by the sound and the story it carried. The boy played with focus and feeling, each chord a reflection of his journey and love for the piano. Backstage, his family watched anxiously, holding their breath with every note. They had seen him practice for years, but this performance was different. The hall was larger, the audience more formal, and the stakes higher. Yet the boy played as he always had, with sincerity and care, letting the music flow from his heart to the keys. The director's eyes remained fixed on him, a small smile playing on his lips, intrigued by the boy's quiet confidence and skill. As the performance continued, the boy felt a sense of connection, not just with the piano, but with everyone in the room. The music had a way of reaching beyond words, touching emotions and creating a shared experience. He was no longer nervous. He was immersed in the story he was telling through sound. Every note mattered, and every note contributed to the unfolding expression of his talent and dedication. When the final notes faded, the boy lifted his hands slowly, letting the silence embrace the room. The audience remained quiet for a brief moment, as if savoring the ending, before breaking into applause. Backstage, his parents smiled, their eyes shining with pride and joy. Other participants whispered in admiration, inspired by the boy's ability to play with both skill and heart. The director, true to his earlier joke, nodded approvingly, a twinkle in his eyes indicating genuine respect and surprise. The boy stepped off the stage, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction. He had faced the challenge he had prepared for, shared his music honestly, and found a deeper confidence within himself. Backstage, the energy shifted from tension to celebration, with quiet conversations and smiles filling the space. The boy realized that this was not just an audition. It was a step in his journey, a moment that would stay with him and shape the way he approached music and life. Walking toward the exit, he reflected on the experience. The fear and anticipation had been real, but so had the joy and the sense of accomplishment. He understood that music was not about perfection or approval, but about expression and connection. Each performance, each note, each challenge was part of a story that belonged to him and to anyone who listened. The boy felt grateful for the support he had received, the lessons he had learned, and the opportunity to share a part of himself through the piano. Today had been a turning point, a moment of growth, and a reminder that courage, practice, and love for what you do can carry you through even the most nerve-wracking experiences. The boy stepped onto the stage again, this time for the real performance that would decide whether he would be recognized by the Academy. The previous audition had been a warm-up, a way to ease into the nerves and excitement of performing in front of an audience. Now everything felt more serious. The lights seemed brighter, the hall larger, and the eyes of the director and audience sharper. He took a deep breath, reminding himself of all the hours he had spent practicing, the small victories, and the moments of frustration that had taught him patience. He walked to the piano and sat down, fingers hovering over the keys. The wood felt familiar beneath him, as if it were welcoming him back. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, listening to the silence in the hall, feeling it settle around him like a blanket. Each sound, even the quiet shuffling of the audience or the faint creak of the stage, seemed amplified in the stillness. The boy felt his heart beating steadily, not with fear, but with anticipation and excitement. He thought of the first time he had performed in front of anyone, just a small family gathering where he had played a simple tune. The memory brought a small smile to his face. Back then, he had been terrified, but the encouragement he had received had stayed with him. Today, he carried that same courage, now strengthened by years of dedication and practice. He reminded himself that the music was his to share, and that the audience would feel what he felt if he played with honesty and cared. As he pressed the first key, the note resonated clearly through the hall. It was a simple sound, yet it carried the weight of all his preparation. The boy's fingers moved gracefully, each note flowing naturally into the next. He felt the music around him, a living presence guiding his hands and connecting him with the listeners. The melody he had chosen was one he had poured his heart into, a piece that required both technical skill and emotional depth. Every chord, every pause, Every subtle change in tempo was an expression of his journey as a pianist. The director leaned forward, watching intently. There was a subtle shift in his expression, from curiosity to admiration. The boy did not notice at first. He was entirely absorbed in the music. His eyes were closed, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. Each note was a conversation, each chord a sentence, telling a story without words. The audience seemed to hold its collective breath, listening to the boy's performance as if it were a rare gift. Backstage, the boy's parents watched nervously. They had seen him practice countless times, but this was different. The stakes were higher, the audience larger, and the performance more critical. Yet they felt pride and awe as they watched their child pour his heart into the music. They exchanged quiet smiles, knowing that this was more than a test. It was a moment of growth and self-expression. The boy's mind drifted briefly to the lessons he had taken over the years. Each teacher had taught him something unique. Patience, precision, emotional connection. He remembered the long afternoons spent practicing difficult passages, the moments when frustration threatened to overwhelm him, and the triumph of finally mastering a challenging piece. All of that preparation was now paying off. The boy realized that every struggle, every late night of practice, had led to this moment of clarity and confidence. As the performance continued, he felt a deep sense of connection with the piano and the music. The hall seemed to disappear around him, leaving only the sound and the feeling of the notes under his fingers. He played with intention, letting each note carry the emotion he wanted to express. The audience was captivated, sensing the sincerity and skill in his performance. There was no rush, no fear of mistakes, only a pure flow of music that spoke louder than words ever could. The boy remembered the playful comment the director had made earlier about kneeling if he performed well. At first, it had made him anxious, but now it felt like a light-hearted acknowledgement of the challenge he had taken on. He played not for approval, but for the love of music itself. Each note was a reflection of his dedication, his passion, and his courage. The director's presence, once intimidating, now felt like silent encouragement. The piece reached its climax, a section filled with rapid arpeggios and soaring chords. The boy's fingers moved with precision and confidence, each movement flowing naturally from practice and instinct. He could feel the energy of the audience, the anticipation, and the awe in the room. The music became a dialogue, not just between him and the piano, but between him and everyone listening. He was fully immersed, experiencing a connection that transcended words. As the final notes approached, the boy slowed slightly, letting the music settle gently. He allowed the last chord to linger in the air, a soft echo that seemed to reach every corner of the hall. He lifted his hands slowly, savoring the moment of silence that followed. The audience remained still for a heartbeat, as if caught in a spell, before breaking into enthusiastic applause. The sound washed over him, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. The director stood, clapping slowly and deliberately. His expression was one of genuine admiration and surprise. Backstage, the boy's parents were beaming, unable to contain their happiness. Other participants whispered in amazement, inspired by the performance they had witnessed. The boy felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, knowing that he had faced his nerves, expressed his heart, and shared his music with authenticity. He stepped off the stage, feeling both exhilarated and humbled. The experience had been more than a test of skill. It had been a test of courage, focus, and self-expression. Backstage, the atmosphere was lighter now, filled with quiet conversations, smiles, and soft laughter. The boy realized that this performance had changed something inside him. He had discovered a deeper confidence and a stronger connection to the music he loved. Walking toward the exit, he reflected on the journey that had led him here. Every practice session, every moment of doubt and triumph, every lesson learned had contributed to this experience. He understood that music was not about perfection or recognition, but about expressing oneself and connecting with others. Today had been a step forward, a confirmation of his passion and dedication, and a reminder that courage and persistence could turn fear into achievement. The boy knew that this was only the beginning of his journey. There would be more performances, more challenges, and more opportunities to grow. Yet he also knew that the lessons of today would stay with him. The joy of playing, the thrill of sharing music, and the confidence gained from facing his fears would guide him through future experiences. He felt grateful for the support of his family, teachers, and the academy, recognizing that their encouragement had been an essential part of his success. As he left the hall, the boy felt a sense of calm and fulfillment. The world outside seemed brighter, more alive, and full of possibilities. Music had given him a voice, a way to express what words could not. The applause, the smiles, and the admiration he had received were meaningful. But the true reward was the knowledge that he had played from his heart. That knowledge, he realized, would carry him through every note he would play in the future, inspiring him to continue learning, growing, and sharing his love for music with the world. The boy returned to the stage with a sense of quiet determination. He had already performed once and felt the excitement of sharing his music, but this time it was different. He knew that the audience was paying close attention, and the director's playful challenge about kneeling still lingered in his mind. There was a mixture of nerves and anticipation, but he felt ready to let the music take him where it needed to go. Every step toward the piano felt deliberate, a small acknowledgement of how far he had come in his journey with the instrument. He sat down and rested his hands on the keys, feeling the familiar texture beneath his fingertips. The hall was silent, filled with an expectant energy that seemed to hum through the air. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, allowing himself to focus entirely on the music he was about to play. The memories of years spent practicing, learning, and sometimes struggling with difficult pieces came flooding back. Each lesson, each late night at the piano, had prepared him for this very moment. The first notes sounded gentle and precise. They carried a clarity and confidence that immediately drew the audience in. He let the music flow naturally, his fingers dancing across the keys with a grace that belied his youth. Each chord, each sequence of notes, was infused with emotion, reflecting his dedication and love for the piano. The boy played not just to impress, but to tell a story, to share a piece of himself through the sound. The director leaned forward, his expression a mix of amusement and genuine admiration. He had made a light-hearted comment earlier, but now he was watching with an intensity that reflected the depth of the boy's talent. The boy did not notice at first. He was fully absorbed in the performance, lost in the ebb and flow of the music. The audience seemed to hold its breath with each note, caught up in the story unfolding on the piano. Backstage, his parents watched with quiet pride. They had seen him practice countless hours, but witnessing him perform on a stage of this size was something entirely different. They smiled at each other, silently celebrating the courage and skill their child was demonstrating. Around them, other young performers whispered in awe, inspired by the boy's ability to combine technical skill with emotional expression. Even the older students looked on with admiration, realizing that true talent was not just about practice but also about heart. The boy's mind wandered briefly to the teachers and mentors who had guided him. Each one had contributed to his growth in their own way, teaching him patience, precision, and the importance of feeling the music rather than merely playing it. He remembered the encouragement he had received when he struggled, the careful corrections, and the gentle praise for even the smallest successes. All of those experiences had built a foundation of confidence and resilience that now allowed him to play freely and beautifully. As the piece continued, the boy felt a deep connection with the piano and the audience. The music seemed to speak directly to the listeners, conveying emotions that words could not capture. He allowed himself to become part of the melody, moving with it, letting it guide his hands and express what he could not say otherwise. The hall felt alive with the resonance of his performance, each note a bridge between him and everyone listening. The director's initial playful comment about kneeling became a silent acknowledgement of the boy's achievement. There was no need for words. The music itself had made its statement. The boy played with focus and passion, understanding that the true reward was not the reaction of others, but the ability to express himself fully and authentically. Each chord, each phrase, was a testament to his dedication, courage, and love for the piano. The piece reached a particularly challenging section, filled with rapid sequences and complex harmonies. The boy's fingers moved with precision and confidence, guided by years of practice and a deep familiarity with the instrument. He could feel the energy in the room, the collective attention of the audience, and he allowed it to fuel his performance rather than intimidate him. The music became a dialogue, not just with the piano, but with the listeners, each note a word, each chord a sentence. As he approached the final section, the boy slowed the tempo slightly, letting the music breathe and resonate. He played with sensitivity and intention, savoring each note and allowing it to linger. The audience seemed to lean in, captivated by the emotion and skill in the performance. The hall was filled with a quiet reverence, a shared moment of appreciation for the boy's artistry and courage. When the last note sounded, he lifted his hands slowly, letting the silence embrace the room. For a brief moment, there was stillness, as if the audience were absorbing the final echoes of the music. Then, applause erupted, warm and enthusiastic, filling the hall with energy and admiration. The boy felt a wave of relief and joy, knowing that he had given his best and shared something meaningful with everyone present. The director stood, clapping deliberately, his eyes shining with respect and delight. He had kept his word in a playful sense, giving a small bow of recognition to the boy's extraordinary performance. Backstage, the boy's parents were beaming, their hearts full of pride and happiness. Fellow participants whispered among themselves, inspired and motivated by what they had witnessed. The boy felt a quiet satisfaction, a deep sense of accomplishment that went beyond applause or recognition. He stepped off the stage, feeling a mixture of exhilaration and humility. The experience had been more than a performance. It had been a journey of courage, focus, and expression. Backstage, the atmosphere was alive with excitement and conversation, smiles and quiet laughter filling the space. The boy understood that this moment would stay with him, a milestone in his development as a musician and as a person. Walking toward the exit, he reflected on the lessons he had learned. Music was more than skill or technique. It was a way to communicate, to connect, and to share a part of oneself. Every practice session, every moment of doubt and triumph, had prepared him for this moment. He felt gratitude for his family, teachers, and the academy, recognizing their role in supporting his growth. The joy of playing, the thrill of sharing music, and the confidence gained from facing challenges were rewards he would carry with him into the future. The boy knew that his journey with music was just beginning. There would be more performances, more challenges, and more opportunities to grow. Yet he also knew that the lessons of this experience, courage, perseverance, and authenticity, would guide him in every step he took. Music had given him a voice, a way to express what words could not, and he felt ready to continue learning, performing, and sharing his passion with the world. The applause, the smiles, and the admiration were meaningful, but the true reward was the knowledge that he had played from his heart, and that knowledge would inspire him for years to come. The boy walked off the stage, his hands still tingling from the music he had just played. The applause echoed in his ears, filling him with a warmth he could hardly describe. It was a mix of pride, relief, and excitement, all swirling together in a way that made his chest feel full. He knew that this moment would stay with him forever, a memory of courage and achievement that no one could take away. He glanced toward the director, who gave a small, approving nod, his earlier playful joke about kneeling now feeling like a genuine acknowledgement of the boy's talent and dedication. Backstage, the boy's parents rushed to meet him, their faces lit with joy and pride. They hugged him tightly, speaking in quiet, excited whispers about how well he had played. The boy smiled, feeling their support wrap around him like a comforting blanket. He realized that their belief in him, even when he doubted himself, had been a guiding force throughout his journey. Every late night of practice, every frustrated tear, and every small triumph had led to this moment, and it felt incredible to have it witnessed and appreciated. Around them, other young musicians were still performing or waiting for their turn. The boy noticed their expressions. Some were nervous, some focused, some inspired by what they had just seen. He felt a quiet sense of responsibility, knowing that his performance could motivate others to keep practicing, to push through their fears, and to embrace the joy of music. Music, he realized, was not just about playing notes correctly. It was about touching hearts and creating connections, even with strangers in a hall. The director finally approached him, his eyes shining with admiration. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You have a gift, and more importantly, you have the courage to share it. Never lose that." The boy felt a lump in his throat, overwhelmed by the sincerity of the words. He nodded, trying to express his gratitude, knowing that simple words could never capture the depth of his feelings. The director's acknowledgement was more than praise. It was a validation of the years of hard work, dedication, and love for music. The boy's mind drifted back to the hours spent practicing alone in his room, the times when his fingers hurt, and he wanted to quit, the small victories that kept him going, and the encouragement he had received from his parents and teachers. Every struggle and every moment of perseverance had contributed to this moment of triumph. He realized that success was not an instant thing. It was built on countless small efforts, patience, and determination. The journey itself had shaped him, teaching him resilience, focus, and the value of believing in oneself. He remembered the nervous excitement of the first audition and how he had learned to let the music guide him, to trust his fingers and his instincts. Each note had been a reflection of his experiences, emotions, and growth. The applause and admiration from the audience were gratifying, but the true reward was the understanding that he could face challenges, embrace vulnerability, and express himself fully. Music had become a mirror of his character, a way to show the world not just skill, but heart and courage. The boy walked through the hallway of the academy, the echo of his footsteps mingling with the fading sounds of applause. Teachers and students exchanged nods and smiles, acknowledging his performance. Some came forward to offer kind words, encouragement, or congratulations. Each interaction reinforced the feeling that his dedication mattered, that the long hours and persistent effort had a real impact. He felt a sense of belonging, understanding that music connected people, creating bonds that transcended age, experience, and background. Later, when the hall had quieted down, the boy sat at a small piano in an empty corner, letting his fingers move over the keys softly. He played for himself this time, not for an audience, not for approval, but simply because the music had become part of him. Each note was familiar and comforting, a reminder of why he had begun this journey. He reflected on the path ahead, knowing that there would be more challenges, more performances, and more opportunities to grow. But he also knew that the lessons learned today, the courage to face fear, the patience to refine skill, and the joy of sharing music, would guide him in every step. The boy's parents joined him, listening quietly as he played. There was a sense of calm and contentment, a feeling that transcended words. They knew that their child had experienced something profound, a moment that would shape his confidence and outlook on life. The applause and recognition had been important, but the real impact was internal, the awareness of capability, the embrace of passion, and the understanding that hard work and love for what you do could create extraordinary moments. Even as the evening came to a close, the boy found himself thinking about the future. He imagined other performances, more challenging pieces, and opportunities to share his music with larger audiences. He considered the possibility of teaching, composing, or performing professionally one day. Yet, he understood that the core of his journey was the love for music itself, the joy of expression, and the courage to keep pursuing something meaningful. The applause would fade, but the lessons and the experiences would remain. As he left the academy, the boy felt a sense of quiet pride and accomplishment. The streets outside were filled with the usual evening sounds, but to him, they felt different, brighter, alive with possibility. He reflected on how far he had come, from nervous practice sessions in a small room to performing on a stage in front of an audience and a respected director. Each step of the journey had been essential, shaping his character and nurturing his talent. Walking home, he thought about the people who had supported him along the way. His family, teachers, and mentors who had guided him patiently, offering encouragement, correction, and inspiration. He realized that talent alone was not enough. It was the combination of guidance, perseverance, and a willingness to face fear that had led to his success. Music had taught him lessons that went far beyond the notes on a page. It had taught him discipline, resilience, empathy, and the value of expressing oneself fully. By the time he reached home, the boy felt a profound sense of fulfillment. He had faced his fears, shared his music honestly, and received recognition that, while gratifying, was secondary to the deeper satisfaction of achievement. He sat quietly at the piano in his room, replaying pieces in his mind and fingers, letting the music soothe and inspire him. He understood that each performance was not an end, but a step in a lifelong journey of growth and expression. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about the applause, the smiles, and the pride in his parents' eyes. He felt a sense of calm and determination, knowing that he had discovered something important about himself. The courage to face challenges, the persistence to continue despite fear, and the joy of sharing what he loved were gifts that would stay with him forever. Music had given him a voice, a way to connect, and a path to express his deepest emotions. The experience had changed him, and he felt ready for the adventures and challenges that lay ahead. The boy knew that there would be more auditions, more performances, and moments of doubt and nervousness in the future. But he also knew that he had learned something invaluable. That preparation, courage, and a love for what you do could turn fear into triumph. He would carry the memory of this day, the feeling of the audience's admiration, and the pride in his own performance as a source of inspiration. Music had shown him the beauty of perseverance, the power of expression, and the importance of believing in oneself. As he drifted off to sleep, the boy imagined the piano waiting for him, keys ready to tell stories, share emotions, and create connections. He felt a sense of excitement for the future, knowing that every note he played would be another step in his journey. The experience at the academy had been transformative, not just because of recognition or applause, but because it had revealed the strength, dedication, and passion within him. He knew that the journey would continue, full of challenges and triumphs, but he felt ready, inspired, and deeply grateful for the gift of music and the courage it had given him.